Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for those that show up knowing I was going to be here. You cannot hear me with this thing? Okay.
Preach loud.
All right. Because usually when I talk at home, Dave's like, I'm like, okay. Small voice. Well, I actually asked him for one because I wanted a mic, and so he's probably not getting it for me because I'd be wearing it all the time. And furthermore, I was right about the other day. And then he would carry the piece. He would carry the piece that would cut me off. Yeah. You see how him and I banter back and forth. It's like that at home. So That's right. But I win a lot of the times. But don't tell him. Okay. All right, I will. Because I can. Anyway, the last a few weeks ago, when we came together, we talked about Saul and David, and we talked about them in leadership. And we saw the difference between how Saul handled issues that come up in his life and really kind of how petty he was, and he was getting in the flesh, and the difference between that and how David handled leadership, which is no matter what happened with him, around him, what was done to him, he always behaved wisely. So we went through that a couple of weeks, and so I felt God wanted us to stay with the theme of Saul versus David, and today we're going to talk about Saul versus David in battle and how they both reacted in battle. So just to give a little bit of history to kind of lead up the type of person Saul was versus the type of person David was, I'm just going to give a little bit of history. So if I seem to have said the same things last time we came together, I apologize. So anyway, we know that the Israelites wanted a king. They wanted a king like everybody else. And so they went to Samuel and they were saying, tell God, and I'm paraphrasing all this, tell God that we want a king just like everybody else, like every other nation. We want one to judge us. Now, right there, you find that where they're wrong, they wanted a man to judge them as king like every other nation. Right there, they should have realized what they were doing, but they didn't. They just wanted to be like everybody else. And so even God warned them, he's going to take this, he's going to do this to you, he's going to, take your children, he's going to make them, servants and, in the army, and he's going to tax you and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, we don't care. We don't care. We want someone just, to judge us just like every other nation. So in verse 10, chapter 10:5, Samuel goes ahead and he anoints Saul. So the people choose Saul, which was a Benjamite. So they choose him. But when it came time to make him king, he was actually hiding behind some equipment. So they had to pull him out. This another indication. This man who they want to be king over them, they chose him because he was the tallest of all and he was very, very handsome. And so they chose him by the way he appeared. And so they had to pull him out because he was hiding behind some equipment. When it came to battle, God had to put a spirit of whoop butt on Saul, for Saul to go out in battle, had to put a spirit of anger on Saul so that he would go out and he would battle. Okay, so he was king for many, many years, but he kept disobeying God. God would give him an instruction and he would either do it halfway or he wouldn't do it at all. And one of the major things he did is that he sought a medium concerning battle. So instead of like going to Samuel and seeking God's face, he went to a medium to seek their counsel. And so about that time, God just about had enough. And so he fired Saul. So Saul was fired. And one of Saul's greatest excuses, to me was, he feared the people. This was their king, okay? And he feared them. So we see how Saul does in battle. We see how he does in leadership. He was awful. He was an awful person. And people still followed him. They were willing to follow him because they go by sight, right? So they wanted God in the flesh. However, he was God, but he wasn't God of Israel. Does that make sense? Okay, so and so he lost his kingdom, and on the same day, David was anointed as king. Of course, we know that Saul didn't lose his kingdom that day that the Lord left him, and David did not become king. David was anointed, but he didn't actually become king that day. But God left Saul, and he was upon David from that time. So that's 16:13. Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him, David, in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel arose and went to Ramah, that's where he was hanging out, where he lived. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a distressing or an evil spirit troubled him. A lot of scholars believe, when you study it, they think it was a panic attack. Anxiety and a panic attack is what Saul suffered. And so, of course, we know that he, one of his servants suggested, hey, I know this really cool harp player. And so, Saul's like, yeah, bring him on. So, he knew David. He knew about David, knew David very well, loved David at this point. Okay, so here we are at 17. This is where I want to park in this chapter. So the Philistines in 17:1 says the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle. They were gathered at Succoth, and it belongs to Judah. So we know that they were battling the Israelites in their own land. So they were in constant war against the Philistines and some other armies. But you mostly always hear it's about the Philistines. So just a little fun fact about the Philistines is the Philistines come from the descendants of Ham, which is the second son to Noah, which is also the son that Noah cursed his descendants for seeing him naked and telling his brothers about it. That's kind of a fun fact. So the Philistines came against Israel, and it also says that in verse 2, it says that even Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. So it's important to note that you had the Philistines in full array battle, ready to battle, but you also had the men of Israel, and Saul was ready to do battle. So the Philistines were on this little hillside, and the Israelites were on this hillside, and there's this valley right in the middle. Okay, so they're all ready. Well, there's this guy decides to come out, their champion, and his name is Goliath. And so a couple weeks ago, we realized we measured Goliath, and he was 9 feet 9 inches. What does that look like? So, honey, if you'll stand up.
I'm not 9 feet 9 inches.
Dave is 6'2", but do you see that blue tape? That is exactly 9 feet 9 inches. So, yeah. Yeah. Will you all stand for me, just for fun? Will you stand for me? Look at the ceiling, and that would be Goliath's head. I mean, just, can you, I want you guys to stand. I want you to feel, because this is really important. Will you feel that emotion? Can you imagine a man standing in front of you whose head is looking down at you? Can you feel that? He's not even here, that intimidation. Okay, so if you're in a crowd, if you're in a crowd of people and some guy bumps you and he's 9'9", what are you going to do? Right? Okay. All right, how about this? What if you're in a crowd, you got your kids and your grandkids, and this guy bumps your child or grandchild? What are you going to do? 9'9", what are you going to do? Yeah, probably. Yeah, hopefully he'd be nice and go, but you'd see him out. I just wanted you to feel that, because this is important that you feel.
I know. Find a doorway to run through.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I wanted you to kind of get a sense of 9'9". He was not a skinny, scrawny fella because he carried 125 pounds of armor. Now, I don't have 125. I don't know any of you that want to try it. So, but he had a full bronze helmet. He had armor. He had a breastplate over him. He had shin guards. He had a javelin, a spear, a sword, and a shield. Now he took all of this out in the middle of the valley, threatening, calling the Israelites all sorts of names, coming against their God. In fact, he says, he stood and cried out, this is in 8, to the armies of Israel and said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? As if we're supposed to be impressed by that. And you, the servants of Saul, doesn't even acknowledge God in it, not even the servants of God, right? Choose a man for yourself and let him come down to me. And if he's able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. So if you fast forward, when Goliath was killed, did the Philistines go, oh, okay, we'll be your servants? No, they ran. So that didn't even work out. He lied. So when Saul and all of Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid, which means that they had extreme anxiety and they were fearful. Notice it said Saul and all of Israel heard these words. So Goliath could have took a handful of javelins and started throwing them. Killed 1 or 2 people at least, right? I'm sure probably all of Israel would have fled. He just could have went all out with his sword and his shield and just went in the crowd and killed a ton of them. But he didn't. He used intimidation. I think he actually had joy in coming out for 40 days in the morning and in the evening, threatening them. And he had intimidation because then he would see that their fear. He would look out at them and they would see them hiding. And so that's what built his confidence up. So by the time David came along, there was no fear in Goliath. He intimidated them and they allowed themselves to be intimidated. So they were led by their emotions, and that's where I want to go. I want to talk about our emotions. And so we might agree to disagree, but we have a soul, correct? Our soul is made up our mind, our will, what we want to do, and our emotions. Out of the 3, which would you say leads the 2? It's our emotions. Think about it. Your emotions make up your mind and what you're going to do. Your emotions make up your will to run or to hide. And it's in the positive too. Your emotions make the decision of, I feel like God told me to move to Africa, and you sell all your stuff and you go on emotions. Or you see you're a young girl and you see a boy and you do things that you wouldn't normally do because you're led by your physical emotions. So we're led most of the time by our, thank you. If we are not strong enough to be led by our spirit, because that's who we are a spirit, then we will tend to be led by our emotions, and our emotions are the ones that make the decision for us. Every day, we have emotions. There are basically 8 categories of emotions. If you study it and look it up, some people will say 27, some people will 10, but basically you hear that there's like 8 basic categories where every emotion fits into. And then you have the word feelings. Feelings are the reaction to our emotions. If we feel joy, we laugh. If we feel fear, we shake, or we have heart palpitations, right? Or we cry. So feelings are the reaction to the emotion of fear or joy, okay? So we also see in verse 23, because that was in 11 where it says Saul and all of Israel heard these words of the Philistines, and they had great anxiety, and they were greatly afraid, which means they were fearful. And so then in 23 it says, at this point David's father tells him, go down to the battle. Here's some bread and some meat and a donkey, and go down there and see how things are, because 3 of his older sons were in battle, and I'm sure he just wanted to know how they were doing. So David was obeying his father, and he left the sheep, and he went down with the donkey and the food. And while he's there, he's just like, hey, how's everything going? What's going on here? And while he's standing there, he hears about the time that Goliath comes out, right? Goliath comes, and he hears Goliath threatening them. And so David, it says in, David left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper and ran to the army and came and greeted his brothers. So he talked to them there. This is in 23, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistine, and he spoke according to the same words, so David heard them. And it says, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were dreadfully afraid. They were extremely, extraordinarily fearful. So it says that the Israel army came out and they were ready. Then here comes Goliath, and then they run. This is constant. And this is what David witnesses. So David says, he says, okay, what will be done to the person who kills him? They tell him, for time's sake, I'm going to pass on. But man, please read 17. Just read 10 through 18, if anything, but read the whole thing. Read all of it if you can. But just to get the full scope of what's going on here, and allow yourself to feel it, feel the emotions of what's going on. So Saul basically hears David said, well, why isn't everybody going out there and getting him then? So Saul hears this, and he brings David forward because he knows David. Don't forget that. So David said to Saul in verse 32, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. David had confidence. It wasn't nothing to David to go out there and fight this 9'9" giant. So, Saul argues back and forth and says, you're young, you're a youth. We know he's going to be about between 13 and 19. It's about the youth age back then. So, and David said to him, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went after it and struck it and delivered that lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it. Think about this. I had pictures and I forgot to bring them. But if you can think about a lion or a bear and David having no problem going to fight against that animal to bring back one of his father's sheep. So animals back then were like liquid gold. It was gold. So it was just not okay for a beast to take an animal. And it certainly wasn't okay for someone who's in charge. He says it's his father's sheep, so his father entrusted him. You can go somewhere else with that also, that'll preach. So anyway, so he's telling Saul about this. Now, I would so much as say that I think at first, during these times that he came against the bear and the lion, he was fearful. He had to have been afraid. But he knew that he had to retrieve something that what belonged to his father. He knew that he had to retrieve that. So that's that perfect example when Joyce Meyer says, do it afraid. And David was willing to do it afraid. He was willing to go out and get the lamb, or to save the lamb, to deliver the lamb from the bear or the lion, which surely would have killed him, right? Okay, so in other words, David experienced God, and God delivering him from the paw of the bear and from the paw of the lion. So by the time David was standing and saw Goliath in the middle of the field, 9 feet and 9 inches, that was nothing to him. Nothing to him, because he faced a 900-pound bear, a 500-pound lion, and survived. So his confidence wasn't in his ability. His confidence was in, and how do we know that? Because in verse 37, amen, Pastor, it says, moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from a hand of this Philistine. And Saul said, I love this. Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with you then. Go on. You think you're all that in a bag of chips? I mean, I just really see, I see Saul going, okay then, who am I? And he's probably going, yes, yes, So David's confidence was fully in the Lord's ability to deliver him. So David takes a staff, and he takes 5 smooth stones. He's got a sling, and he's got his pouch. So, there's a lot of, why 5 stones? I just think it's a handful. I mean, we could go on the side of let's be spiritual, but I don't want to. I just want to be I want to stay in the natural, okay? He just grabbed 5 stones because if he's going to kill Goliath on the field, he's probably going to have to also do battle. And all he had was 5 stones, a sling, and a staff. So I don't know how he held the staff, stone, sling, And he had to have been really good because Goliath had a helmet. So he had to be precise. So David killed Goliath. And I believe he killed him twice. I believe because, the word doesn't contradict itself. Can we all agree to that? All right. So when it says that David ran towards Goliath and he struck, it's in 49, he put his hand in his bag and took out a stone and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead so that the stone sank in his forehead and he fell on his face to the earth. I believe he was brain dead. Forward, brain dead. How many of you know that you could be brain dead and still alive? Yeah. So what does he do? He runs over to the Philistine because Philistines don't know he's dead. He just thinks he's knocked out, if anything, right? So David then took his sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him. So not only did he kill him in the mind, but he killed him in the body. Now we could do spiritual there, right? So and then, just to make matters worse so that they know, he chopped his head off, which is then cool because he holds the head, and he's held it for some time, even to the point when Saul says, hey, bring David over to me. He brings his head over to the king, with him to the king, So David put his faith fully in God. So you could say that Goliath put his self-confidence and ability in himself, right? And what happened? He died. The Israelites put their self-confidence in a man. What happened? Full of fear, worry, trepidation, right? David puts his self-confidence and his ability in the hands of God, believing that God will see him through. And what happens? God sees him through. So that in itself is an awesome lesson. Don't put your faith in yourself. It's limited. Do not put your faith in man. They will fall off that pedestal. Put your faith in God. Now, we have armor too. So David's armor was God himself, right? He still had to go do battle. He didn't just go out there and at him. I was thinking when Dave and I would play pool or we would bowl in our younger years, we would bowl and we'd go, like at a, and, and then if they messed up, they would think that, it was because, we had power. I got the power, so I'm just saying, I got the power. All right. At least that was in my mind. So don't mess with me. I was busy. Okay, so anyway, okay, where was I? So David's armor was in God himself. So here's our lesson. We have armor also, and our armor is also in God himself. It is our first line of defense that we must understand that we have before we do any kind of verbal battle or any kind of battle whatsoever, verbal, physical, whatever, and that is our armor. And so we definitely went over that a few months ago, but we need to understand it is not our helmet of salvation, but it's his helmet of salvation that sits on our head. And it's his breastplate of righteousness that stands before us. Jesus himself is standing in front of us. And who can come against Jesus? Nobody. It's his righteousness. So even if we're battling by prayer and supplication, even though we're battling, if we get weak in that area and we fall short, our armor is our defense mechanism, because the enemy cannot come against the righteousness of God. He cannot come against the helmet of salvation. He cannot come against your belt of truth unless you don't believe the belt of truth. Does anyone not believe the truth? He'll try that first. He'll come there first. It said, do not doubt the belt of truth. He'll come against your peace. But it's not our peace that he comes against. It's the peace of God. So if you rely on the peace of God, he can't come against that. So first of all, we need to recognize that we have form-fitting armor that's form-fitting to us and for us. And our armor is different from one another. It's the same righteousness, same helmet, same peace, same sword, but it's different to you. It's specific to you and your needs. We don't have the same thing. We're unique. We're the same, one body, but we're unique. How he deals with me is different how he deals with you. If you knew how he dealt with me, you'd be going, thank you, Jesus. I used to look at Joyce Myers and go, thank you, you don't talk to me like you talk to her, because she's very D, So anyway, so that's the first thing, is that we need to understand is that we have protection, security. We have an impenetrable, fortified wall to fall back on if we need to fall back. That's it. Now, this is a scripture that God gave me, and I thought this is an awesome scripture. We say it all the time. So I want to encourage you in what you already know, because I'm not saying nothing to you that's new. I'm just encouraging you in what you know. Philippians 4:6. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ. I believe, the word guard is actually like those linemen. Guard your heart. I'm just telling you, that's the picture. So that's the guard your heart. I believe also the guard is the armor that we put on. Jesus standing in front of us going, what? Like, what are you going to do? What? Really, what are we going to do? Maybe it's just me thinking that. Anyway, I'm having fun. I don't know about you. I'm having an awesome time. Okay, so I want to encourage you in this scripture that you already know. First of all, Paul encourages us. He says, don't be anxious. Don't be led by your emotions of what you see in the natural or by what you're feeling. Don't be led by what you're feeling, what emotions that you feel or that are affecting you. So we need to say to ourselves, I will not be anxious about being sick. I'm not going to be anxious about needing a job. I'm not going to be anxious about paying my bill. I refuse to be anxious about it. So he's encouraging us, don't be anxious. Don't feel fear. Don't feel worry. Don't be stressed. It's an encouragement. Don't do this. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer. What's prayer? Prayer is oratory. It is something we do verbal. Let's get together and pray. That means we're going to come together and we're going to verbally speak out loud. So Paul says, pray. Take a standing position on what you want to pray for. What are you believing for? You have to voice it. You have to put it out there. It could be a whisper. It don't matter. Words go out. It could be yelling. I've paced my bedroom. I've yelled out. I've screamed out. I've slammed my hand against walls of a piece of paper that I'm believing for. I've sat there and that's just what I do, because it helps me. I could also just stand here and go, Lord, I just want to thank you so much for helping me in this situation. And it still be just as powerful. right? Okay, but if you know me, I'm pretty, I have my own study room, so when I shut the door, my husband respects that. He doesn't come in because I'm probably going, okay, I'm believing for this. So, all right, so that's when we all come together. We come together in a group, or we can do it individually. But find a place. Kneel, stand, go for a drive, listen to worship music, but just get in that position of prayer, that take a standing position. Make a decision to take it before the Lord. Take your issue before the Lord. And if I were you, this is just my 2 cents, I would do it immediately. When you have that issue with the fence, because the fence comes quickly to all of us, I forgive immediately without even thinking, without even knowing what I'm forgiving for. If I feel it and I acknowledge the fact that I'm feeling offended or rejected or whatever negative I'm feeling, I'll say, you know what, I forgive him. I lay it at the cross and they owe me nothing. And it just helps. Not saying it goes away forever, but the next time that the enemy tries to bring that before me, it helps, because I shut down that emotion. I recognized it for what it was, and I'm getting really pretty good at it. So sometimes I would surmise about 5-10 minutes, and I realize what I'm doing. And the longer that you stew on it, the harder it is to shut the door. So I just would suggest that when you recognize what it is, shut the door immediately without even thinking or processing it. Shut the door. I forgive them. They owe me nothing. It helps. Regardless of how you feel. And this is so important. Don't go by your emotions. Don't live by your emotions. Even the good emotions aren't necessarily good for you. If it feels good, do it. Even those aren't necessarily good for you. Be in tune to your body, how you're feeling. Okay? Be in tune to that. Okay, so then he says, make supplications with prayer and thanksgiving. But in everything by prayer and supplications with thanksgiving. So the word supplication is used 60 times. And so it basically means it's a supplication is a situation in which you go to someone who's in power for help. So Paul is telling you, pray and go to the one who is in power and who's able to handle your situation. Go to that one. So for you, who is it? Is it you got to decide, can you handle it yourself? Do you want to go to someone else? A lot of times we seek counsel, which counsel's good, but we put our whole faith in it. We put our whole faith in a person. External. I externalize everything. Dave is more of he internalizes, but because I externalize, I go to Dave a lot with issues because I talk to myself, I talk out loud. That's just something I need to do. Some of you are like that and some of you are not. But Dave helps me bring it back into focus to God, because sometimes I just want to get it out. Just let me say it and I'm okay. But even those little things, I need to go upward, right? So you have to be careful in who you talk to. Not saying sometimes we need counsel. People come to me, people go to Pastor Scott and Pastor Laura all the time. People will come to you for counsel. Always point them upward. Always point them upward. Otherwise, don't say nothing. Never give your own opinion. You could really hurt someone. Always point them upward. And so for that, I always appreciate my husband. And there's no wrong way of doing it. There's no wrong way on how you choose to go to God with it. You could scream and he'd receive it. It's just however you want to approach him in whatever is going on with you in your situation. And then we advance. This is awesome. With thanksgiving, we advance. We take ground. We build our faith. Let me ask you, have you ever felt thankful? Have you ever felt it? Okay, so we'll sit here and go, Father God, I just want to thank you so much for taking care of, my job, and I'm needing money. So, Father, I just want to believe you for a raise. Thank you, Lord, for hearing my prayer. But have you ever sat there and went, thank you, and feel the emotion? Will you think of something? Think of something you've just, thank you, and you've probably cried over. And you find that you maybe can't breathe, and you just want to put a big smile on your face because you remember what he's done to you, and you feel it in your heart. Feel that way. Feel that way before you even see the end result. Feel that. Because David remembered the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, which caused him to look at Goliath and go, you ain't nothing but a thing. Smooth stone, that's all you are. You ain't worth my time. If I got to go out there and waste my energy, I will. But that's how he saw Goliath. Feel thankful. Sometimes you got to really pull it up. Here's your reward. Peace. This isn't the shalom peace. This is no matter what happens, no matter what goes on in your life or with your family or friends or situations or circumstances, everything is copacetic. That's peace. I don't quite understand it. I should be freaking out right now. But I got peace because I'm just thankful. Feel thankfulness. Surpass what you know and guard your heart and mind. Come on. The fact is, what's going on with you today? That's a fact. The truth is something entirely different. So you have to decide, do you want to live in fact or do you want to live in truth? Can we play that? I want to play something for you. His name is Joshua Aaron. It's How Great Is Our God, and he sings it in Hebrew and English. And it's just, since we're talking about feelings, I just,